wanted to give a little breakdown of the contact tracing apps and the exposure notification API that everyone's talking about. If you're an iPhone user, you may recently have seen a notification 13.5 for iOS that described the exposure notification API. An API is an application programming interface. Simply put, it's a layer that developers can access that makes their job easier. It's so that developers don't have to know a lot about the underlying code of the device that they're working on. It gives them higher level functions to use that makes their lives easier. So if I was writing a Maps app and on the screen I was presenting to the user was a map, and if I wanted to show them where they were on the map, I would have to access the phone's GPS data. Now, that code, if there was no APIs, if there weren't any APIs exposed, that code would be really long. I'd have to know a lot more about the device. I'd have to know a lot more about different programming languages, and it would take way more time. So an API is essentially a tool for developers to use that makes their lives easier. And going back to the location example, getting the GPS from the phone, if Apple or Google or whoever writes an API for the developers to use to write map apps, the code's only going to be this big to grab the location data instead of this big. So yeah, Apple and Google got together. Kind of makes me cringe thinking about it. They have a duopoly on the app market. I think something like 98% of the apps are either Android or iPhone, iOS App Store apps. I think it's something to be concerned about, but I wanted to explain a little bit more about what the exposure notification API will allow the developers to write. What kind of apps will it allow them to write? So the kind of app that you can write with the exposure notification API is this. Let's just say it's already written, and I think I'll just give it by example. That might make it a little bit easier to comprehend. So if, let's say we have two people, Pat and Karen. Now, Pat and Karen don't know each other, but Karen's a really concerned citizen, so she already has the contact tracing app on her phone. In fact, she was part of the beta. I mean, she was really excited to get in there and do her civic duty. So she's really familiar with how this works. Now, she's been getting tested and tested and tested, and she still does not have coronavirus, much to her disappointment. But let's say Pat does. Now, Pat also has the app on his or her phone, and they were both at the grocery store at the same time. So what this app allows, I'll take it from Pat being in the grocery store with Karen before Pat gets diagnosed with COVID-19. So in the phones use what's called Bluetooth Low Energy. So if you did have these apps on your phone, if you wanted to completely disable it, you'd have to not only turn off Bluetooth, but you'd have to turn off your location data in deeper in your settings to turn off the Bluetooth Low Energy radios. So Pat and Karen are in the grocery store. They don't know each other. They walk past each other or come within a 90-foot radius of each other, and their devices exchange tokens. Now, these tokens have no identifiable information in them. They don't have usernames. They don't have names. They don't have location data. They don't have anything. They're just a randomly generated string of text, letters and numbers, really long. And every 5 minutes, each person's phone with the contact app has to be installed and enabled. It'll emit a beacon with this unique identifier. And on top of that, every 10 to 20 minutes, your own phone's unique identifier will change. It'll rotate. That's just a security mechanism. But basically, it boils down to your phone will send out a beacon every 5 minutes. The other phones in the area that have the application installed as well will they'll hear the beacon and they'll save it. So you have to have the app installed for that to work. So now, Pat and Karen go their separate ways. Their phones were in the vicinity of each other for, let's say, 10 minutes. So there's 2 beacons on each of each other's phones with the other person's information, right? Not information, but unique identifier. And Pat goes home, gets sick, goes to the doctor. The doctor says, you have nCoV SARS-2 COVID-19, whatever you want to call it. And so Pat can't simply just say, I have COVID-19 and put it on their phone. Pat has to basically get a special code, whether it's a QR code or a special digit code from their doctor, so that they can say they have COVID and notify and upload that information to the health authorities. So the information that gets shared is this: if they've been diagnosed with COVID-19 and a doctor has verified that and scanned something with their smartphone, what will happen is their phone will contact the central database of the firm that wrote the app. It will upload all of their beacons that they've ever generated on their phone, that they've ever emitted. It'll upload them to the central database. And then all of the other users who are using the same app, at some random, probably unknown to the user interval, they'll download that set of data from all of the people who have ever tested positive. So the data gets downloaded to their phone, and then their phone, their local device, will scan and determine whether or not they've ever come in contact with someone, right? Because Pat and Karen were in contact with each other, or they're in the vicinity. So Karen's phone would have Pat's unique identifier, whatever ones they generated for that 10 minutes they were near each other. And so Karen's phone will download that information, and then it'll scan what the phone has, it'll scan what the centralized database has, and then it'll make that judgment, and it'll say, yes, Karen, you were in contact with someone, not Pat, but somebody who had COVID-19 at some point in time. It's extremely vague, and it's supposed to be done in the name of privacy. Now, that all sounds great on the surface, but my concerns around it are this. If you have an app that just tells you you were around someone that had COVID-19, does that sound like a good idea? And there's no accountability to it. There's no time and place. Now, I'm not arguing there should be. I don't even want this thing on my phone, and I will never install it, even if they make it mandatory. And trust me, it's headed that direction, all right? With the way the world's going, with the way everything has happened thus far, with the way evil and totalitarianism likes to creep into our lives, you can bet your butt that at some time in the future it'll be mandatory to walk around with these things on your phone. Some countries already have this. Now, some experts, the same experts that said that we just need to stay home and flatten the curve because the hospitals are going to be overrun, the same experts that said that there's going to be tens of millions of deaths from COVID-19, the same experts that told us the polar ice caps were going to melt by the year 2007, yeah, those experts. They're also saying that the majority of the population will need to add these on their phone. I mean, that's, I've heard numbers up 60% to 90% need to install the application on their phones to make it effective. Now, I don't buy into everything that's going on right now. I think there are deaths, and I think it's caused by people being sick and abusing their bodies and putting things in it that's not supposed to be there. if people would stay away from sugars, seed oils, and switch to a more whole foods diet, I think it would save their life, literally save their life. You have people you have firms like mega corporations like Pepsi funding BLM, Black Lives Matter, funding riots, trying to virtue signal and say that whites have been oppressing blacks and there's all this racism, when the only racism I see is coming from these young white college-aged liberal girls with face masks on trying to earn their militia badge from Black Lives Matter. You look at their manifesto, it's all about retribution, it's all about reparations, and it's not going to stop. You give them a little bit. I mean, none of my friends and family have aggressed against anybody. I mean, they'll try to convince everyone is a racist. The word has no meaning anymore. It has no meaning. And the events of the past, we can't be held liable for the events of the past. I can tell you, everyone would be guilty. We're all not perfect. We all do wrong things. We all do things that aren't right sometimes, but that's what forgiveness is about. I have nothing that I am sorry for in regards to racism. So I'm not going to apologize to the mob. And going back to the contact tracing, we have these, it all relates to each other, right? So it's not just the contact tracing. You have Pepsi. You shouldn't be drinking Pepsi, all right? I'll just put it that way. You shouldn't be eating foods from these companies that are funding riots on a moral level, but also they're making you sick. They're making your brain sick. They're propagandizing you. They're making your brain sick from a bunch of different levels, physiologically and spiritually, through the messaging that they're emitting, through their advertising, through their propaganda. So stop supporting them. Do you think these Olympic athletes eat Wheaties? Do you think these Olympic athletes drink Coca-Cola? They sponsor the Olympics. It's ridiculous. No, they don't. These mega corporations, they're out to hurt us. I have no problems with free market capitalism. I don't see these firms as a free market, though. They're not. And they don't have your best interests in mind. I want to lift people up. I want people to be lifted up, and they want to keep people down with this messaging. It's terrible. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the contact tracing stuff. I hope that makes sense. If I was right or wrong, let me know. I hope I was able to break it down and kind of dispel some of the fear around it. Now, I personally don't. Again, I don't want to have the apps on my phone, and I won't comply. And I don't think you should either. I think our better options are to eat healthy foods. I personally eat mostly animal foods. The animal foods have cured my autoimmune issues. I don't do well when I eat vegetables, and I think most people would benefit from just switching to a whole foods diet. I had to go a step further and eliminate any triggers in my diet. I primarily eat red meat, and it's done wonders for my health. I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and I've gotten to a point where I'm pretty robust now. I don't get sick very often, if at all. And it's not fair to quarantine people who have gone through great lengths to be healthy. We quarantine the sick. We don't quarantine the healthy. That's tyranny. And we need to stop the madness that's going on. So let's say that you've been found positive for COVID-19. Let's say that somehow, maybe through a Facebook post, you were at a party and someone got sick. And so these contact tracers now have medical authority. They can see that you went to this Facebook, maybe through your public profile, maybe through tools of the state. They can see that you were at a specific location and someone around you was sick as well. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to show up at your door and tell you you need to isolate yourself because you were exposed to COVID-19. And also, your spouse was exposed to COVID-19 too because you were exposed to it. Maybe you were at the same party, maybe you just came home and now you were in contact with your spouse. So technically, she's been in contact or he's been in contact with someone who was in contact with someone who had COVID-19. Now, what these contact tracers can do is they can say that you have to isolate yourself. Now, also, that means no contact with humans, no contact with your dog, and if you can't find someone to watch your kid, we're going to take them from you for 10 to 14 days or however long it is. This is what we're dealing with, folks. They're coming after your kids, and you better get pissed, and you better do something about it. It's a dangerous time. We have to push back against it. I'm not going to let them take my kids away from me. I'm not going to let them take my daughter. I'm not going to let them take my wife. You know, we have to make a stand, and we all have to do it together. And you're going to get ridiculed. You're going to get people calling you all kinds of names. But this is the reality of what we're facing, and I hope that you find this informative. I hope that I explained it well, and let me know if I did. Appreciate it.